He lived in the small, rain-soaked town of Maplewood, Oregon, a place where everyone knew everyone, and where tradition was treated like gospel. In Maplewood, people talked in whispers, but judgment always rang loud. For as long as Ethan could remember, he'd felt different. Not broken, just different. But in a town like his, different was a dangerous word. One chilly autumn evening, as rain drummed softly on the windows, Ethan sat at the dinner table with his parents, Mark and Susan Parker. The smell of roasted chicken filled the air, but he couldn't taste anything. His hands trembled as he pushed peas around his plate. His heart was pounding so hard he could barely breathe. "Dad, Mom," he started, his voice quiet but trembling. "I need to tell you something." Mark looked up from his plate, his deep-set eyes narrowing in curiosity. Susan's gentle smile faltered. Ethan took a breath that shook in his chest. "I'm gay." The words hung in the air like thunder. Mark froze, his fork hovering midair. Susan's face went pale, her eyes darting to her husband. The silence stretched, thick, suffocating, until Mark slammed his fist on the table so hard the plates rattled. "What did you just say?" He growled. "I said—" Ethan swallowed hard. "I'm gay, Dad." Mark's face turned crimson. "You've ruined this family's name," he shouted, standing so fast his chair screeched against the floor. "You've brought shame on us, Ethan." "Mark, please!" Susan tried, but he cut her off. "Don't you please me, Susan. This boy, this thing, is not my son." Tears filled Ethan's eyes. "Dad, I didn't choose this. I just wanted to be honest about who I am." Mark's lip curled. "Honest? You call this honesty? It's disgusting. Get out." "Out of my house." Susan's voice trembled. "Maybe he should go for a while, Mark. You need time to calm down." "Calm down?" Mark barked. "He's not coming back. He's no son of mine." Ethan's breath hitched. The world around him blurred. The one place that had always felt safe suddenly felt foreign. Mark threw a small backpack at his feet. "Take it," he said coldly. "And don't you dare come back!" Ethan's knees nearly buckled as he walked to the door. Rain pounded against the porch. He looked back one last time, hoping his mother would stop him, say something, anything. But Susan just sat there, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. Then Ethan stepped into the storm. The rain felt like knives against his skin. It soaked through his clothes within seconds, but he kept walking. Down Maple Street, past the church, past the closed diner, his breath coming in ragged bursts. The world blurred through his tears. He didn't know where he was going. He only knew he couldn't go home. When his legs finally gave out, he found himself sitting on a park bench near the town square. His backpack was light, just a change of clothes and a few crumpled bills. He curled up, shivering, pulling his hood tight as the cold wind bit at his face. He whispered into the rain, "Why can't they just love me?" The world didn't answer. Only thunder did. By morning, the storm had eased, but Ethan felt worse, tired, hungry, and hollow. His stomach growled as he walked through the quiet streets. Most stores were still closed, but a flickering neon sign caught his eye. Henderson's Market. Open. He pushed open the door, a bell jingling overhead. Behind the counter stood a stocky man with a thick mustache and an unfriendly stare. "What do you want, kid?" the man asked, eyeing Ethan's drenched clothes. "I just need somewhere to stay," Ethan mumbled. "Just for a night," the man frowned. "This ain't a shelter. You can't stay here." "I'll work," Ethan said quickly. "I'll clean, sweep, anything." The man pointed to the door. "Get out before I call the cops." Ethan froze, then nodded silently and stepped back out into the drizzle. His heart ached, but he kept walking until he reached the edge of town. Ahead stood an old crumbling factory. Windows boarded up, roof sagging. He tried the door, but before he could push it open, a gruff voice shouted, "Hey! Get away from there!" From the shadows emerged a man in a leather jacket. His eyes narrowed. "This ain't a place for kids. Go home," Ethan swallowed. "I don't have a home." The man's expression hardened. "Then find one somewhere else." Ethan turned and walked away, his shoes squelching in the mud. By nightfall, he was back in the park. His body trembled from exhaustion. He lay on the bench, staring at the gray sky through the streetlights, until voices cut through the night. "Well, well," someone sneered. "Look who it is. The freak." Ethan sat up to see a group of teenagers approaching. 3 of them, faces half hidden under hoods. One of them, Tyler Briggs, was a local bully known for picking on anyone weaker. "Leave me alone," Ethan said, standing. His voice shook. Tyler smirked. "Oh, don't be shy. We just want to talk." Before Ethan could move, they surrounded him. Someone shoved him back down. Laughter echoed. "Pathetic," one muttered. "Your daddy kick you out?" Ethan's throat closed. Please, just stop. But they didn't stop. They shoved him again, harder this time. Then, red and blue lights flashed. Break it up! A deep voice boomed from a police cruiser. The teens scattered like startled birds, vanishing into the dark. A police officer stepped out, his flashlight beam landing on Ethan. You okay, kid? The officer asked, helping him up. Ethan nodded weakly. Yeah, I think so. The officer studied him. You got somewhere to go? Ethan hesitated. I'll be fine, he lied. The officer sighed. Try to stay out of trouble. Then he drove off, leaving Ethan standing in the cold rain again. That night, Ethan curled up under a tree and cried until he fell asleep. Morning came gray and cold. The park smelled of wet leaves and mud. Ethan's whole body ached, but hunger gnawed even harder. He wandered aimlessly until he smelled something heavenly, fresh bread. Across the street stood Millie's Bakery, a small, old-fashioned shop with fogged windows and a wooden sign. He stood outside for a long time, afraid to go in, but when the door opened, a kind-faced woman stepped out, carrying a tray of pastries. She noticed him immediately. You all right there, sweetheart? She asked. Her voice was warm, motherly. Ethan looked away. I'm fine. You don't look fine, she said gently. Come on in. You look like you could use something warm. He hesitated, then followed her inside. The warmth hit him like sunlight. The smell of cinnamon and coffee filled the air. I'm Millie Thompson, she said, setting down the tray. Sit. I'll get you something. Moments later, she returned with a steaming cup of cocoa and a slice of bread. Eat, she said firmly. Ethan's hands shook as he lifted the mug. The first sip burned his throat, but it felt like heaven. Tears blurred his vision. Thank you, he whispered. Millie smiled softly. You don't have to tell me your story, but it's clear you've been through something. If you need a place to stay, I've got a spare room upstairs. No strings attached. Ethan stared at her, stunned. Why would you help me? Because, she said, her eyes misty. I once knew someone like you. A boy who didn't make it because the world was too cruel. I swore I'd never stand by again. Ethan nodded, unable to speak. Days turned into weeks. Ethan started helping Millie around the bakery, sweeping floors, wiping tables, learning to knead dough. For the first time since he'd left home, he felt safe. But not everyone in town approved. Rumors spread. People whispered when Ethan walked by. Some stopped coming to the bakery. One afternoon, a man stormed in, tall, red-faced, furious. Millie, he barked. You really sheltering that boy? People are talking. It's bad for business. Millie straightened her back. If you have a problem with him, she said calmly, you can take your business elsewhere. You'll regret this, the man hissed before storming out. Ethan looked down, guilt washing over him. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cause trouble. Millie placed a hand on his shoulder. Don't you dare apologize. You're not the problem. They are, but the hostility only grew. Some nights, Ethan would see shadows outside the bakery, hear muffled laughter. Sometimes threats scrawled on notes slid under the door. One evening, someone threw a rock through the window. A single word was spray-painted on the wall. Freak Ethan's stomach twisted. This is my fault, he whispered. No, Millie said firmly, sweeping up the glass. This is fear, and fear is never your fault. The next day, she hired an artist to paint over the graffiti with a mural. A swirl of rainbow colors and the words, all are welcome here. The mural sparked outrage, but also hope. Some townspeople began showing quiet support. Others glared as they passed. But for the first time, Maplewood felt divided, and not everyone was standing with the hate. A week later, during a town meeting about moral values, Ethan sat quietly in the back, heart racing. He recognized one of the speakers, Councilman Mason Briggs, Tyler's older brother. Polished suit, slicked hair, and a voice that carried authority. This town, Mason said, is losing its values. We must stand firm against those who seek to corrupt our youth. Ethan's hands clenched. He wanted to walk out, but something inside him snapped. He stood up. You talk about morals, he said, his voice shaking. But what's moral about hate? What's moral about throwing your own kid into the rain because he's different? The room went silent. Mason's jaw tightened. Sit down, boy. No, Ethan said, his voice steadying. Not this time. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Some people looked away. Others nodded faintly. For the first time, Ethan felt like his words were heard. That night, after the meeting, Mason approached him in the parking lot. You're brave, Mason said quietly. Braver than I was, Ethan frowned. What do you mean? Mason hesitated. Let's just say, I've spent my life hiding who I am, and I don't want to see another kid do the same. Then he turned and walked away. Months passed. Despite ongoing threats, the bakery became a beacon of hope. With Millie's encouragement, Ethan helped start the town's first LGBTQ+ community center, right next door. They painted it the same colors as the mural. The grand opening drew a crowd, supporters and protesters alike. Rainbow flags waved beside angry signs. Ethan stood behind the stage, trembling. Millie squeezed his shoulder. "Speak from your heart, kid. You've already changed more than you realize." Ethan stepped up to the microphone. The murmurs died down. "My name is Ethan Parker," he said, voice unsteady. "A few months ago, I was thrown out of my home for being who I am. I thought my life was over. But then someone showed me kindness. She gave me a roof, food, and hope. And because of her, I'm still standing." He looked out at the crowd. "I'm not here to change anyone's beliefs. I'm here to ask, what kind of town do we want to be? One that fears difference, or one that embraces it?" The crowd was silent. Then, from the back, a woman's voice spoke softly but clearly. "I'm proud of you." Ethan's heart stopped. It was Susan, his mother. Tears streamed down her face as she stepped forward. "I stayed silent when I should have spoken," she said, voice cracking. "I lost my brother that way. I almost lost my son too." "No more!" Gasps rippled through the audience. Then, from the side, another voice spoke. Deep, uncertain, but familiar. "She's right." Ethan turned. His father, Mark, stood there. His eyes were red, his face lined with guilt. "I made mistakes," he said, voice breaking. "I let fear turn me into someone I'm ashamed of. But today, I see my son for who he really is, and I'm proud of him." The protesters fell silent. Even Mason looked away, eyes glistening. Tears blurred Ethan's vision. He stepped toward his parents. For a moment, the whole town seemed to hold its breath. Then he said quietly, "I forgive you." Applause erupted. Millie wiped her eyes, smiling proudly. That night, after the crowd had gone, Ethan stood outside the bakery, the lights of the new community center glowing softly beside it. Millie joined him, handing him a mug of cocoa. "You did it," she said. Ethan smiled faintly. "We did it," Millie chuckled. "Maybe. But you were the one brave enough to take the first step." Ethan looked up at the stars, bright, scattered, endless. "You know what I've learned?" he said. "The hardest battles are the ones that matter most, and no matter how dark it gets, there's always a light waiting at the end." Millie placed a hand on his shoulder. "And sometimes, kid, you are that light." Ethan smiled, feeling warmth spread through his chest. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel broken. He felt whole. He had a family, one by blood, one by choice, and a town that little by little was learning to change. And as the first snowflakes began to fall over Maplewood, Ethan whispered softly to himself, "I'm home."